to run?
Ready
Ready
state.
state. After ready, process is
Running state.
Running.
running. Then, if any high priority process arrived, the process can be preempted and give back to ready state. And what is this state? Waiting state. When the process will be in wait state?
For input output.
It is waiting for input output. And from waiting, it is not going back to running state. Like when you get the process running to ready, ready to running. But from running to waiting and waiting to ready, and then ready from ready queue or ready state to running state. And at the end, process is terminated. Or terminate state. So these are the 5 states. And yesterday we have seen different queues. So which is this queue?
Job queue.
Job queue.
Process is arrived. It is first put in job queue. Then this is
Ready queue.
Ready queue.
and here we have for every device
Device queue.
device queues. Separate device queue for every device. So we have seen 3 queues. Then we have seen 3 type of schedulers. What are those schedulers?
Long term,
Long term,
short term, and medium term.
Short term and intermediate.
Medium term.
Medium term.
Yes, long term, short term, and medium term. Long term is called, what is another name for long term?
Job
Job
scheduler.
scheduler.
Job scheduler.
Why it is called job scheduler or long term scheduler? Job scheduler because it schedules, it transfers a job which is newly created to ready state. That is the job of long term scheduler. And this happens very infrequently. It takes time. Every time when new process is arrive, then that process is ready to run, then the process is allocated to the ready queue. So this process happens infrequently, so it takes a time. It is called long-term scheduler. So here, this transition of a process from new to ready is done by long-term scheduler. Long-term scheduler. And what is the next one? Short-term, where the short-term scheduler you can represent it with. This is short-term scheduler. What is the job of short-term scheduler? Allocate ready-to-run processes to running state or to the CPU for execution. And short-term scheduler, if it is called short queue. What is another name for short-term scheduler?
CPU
CPU
scheduler.
scheduler.
It is also called CPU scheduler because it allocates a process to CPU. And this happens very frequently, so it is called short-term scheduler. Very frequently it is called. And another is intermediate scheduler, which is called medium-term scheduler. Or another name for medium-term scheduler is dispatcher. Dispatcher. The job of dispatcher is to swap in and swap out. What is swap in? This is called swap in. Put the process back to ready state and swap out. Swap out is remove process from running state and the process may wait for some IO operations in wait state, and when it finishes job, it has to put back to ready state. That is the job of dispatcher or medium-term scheduler. Any queries about process states, queues, and scheduler? Slides are visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So we have seen the states. PCB is process control block. It is a record of each process maintained in operating system. And when control switch takes place, when one process state is saved, or when this swap in swap out happens, that time process has to save its state in PCB, and to execute or resume execution, process has to reload its state from process control block. We have seen what are the contents of process control block, then different queues, then different types of schedulers, and context switch. So it is a context switch. When CPU switch to another process, the system must save the state of old process and load the saved state for new process. This is called context switch. And it is, this time is overhead because of, till that when one process is leaving CPU, another process is getting assigned to the CPU. The time in between is called overhead because a system is not doing any useful work in that part, slot of time. And the time required to perform context switch is again depend upon the hardware support. I will talk about processes involved, or what are the jobs that operating system performs as a process manager. First is process creation. How process gets created? One is when you execute a program, that time process gets created. Another is through your program you can create a process. So there are different types of processes. One is called parent process and one is called child process. So parent process creates children processes, which in turn create other processes, and this is will form a tree of processes. So one process, then it may create more than one child, the children, then the children will create another children. So it will be a tree structure. Resource sharing, so different types of resource sharing mechanism for this newly created processes. Now note that we are talking about concurrent processes where we parent and child can execute together, uh, parallelly executing processes. Resource sharing, so in resource sharing there are variations depending upon different operating systems. Parent and child can share all the resources. So whatever the resources allocated to the parent, children can access all those resources. So parent and child can share the resources. Another can be child share subset of parent resource. So child can, parent can keep some resources exclusively for parent itself, and the rest of the resources can be shared by parent with the child. And third situation or scenario can be parent and child share no resources, separate resources for parent, and same set of resources may be allocated for child process. So we are talking about parent process and child process. So when we talk about a process, process is programming execution. And when one process is creating another process, that is called child process. It is again a program in execution. Though both the programs are currently in execution, they are loaded in main memory and they require resources for completion. In that case, parent and child can share all the resources, can share some of the resources, or can share none of the resources. So that this decision is taken by operating system. Then execution, parent and children execute concurrently. So simultaneous execution, parent process is executing, at the same time child process is executing. Or parent wait until child terminates. So parent, all children should get terminated, then only parent can terminate. So there can be these two options. Address space. So child duplicates parent. So whatever the address or memory is allocated to parent, the same memory can be allocated to child. Since child is nothing but creating the replica of the current executing process, or child has a program loaded into it. So different address space for child. This can be also possible. In Unix, we have different commands. Say fork. Fork system call creates a new process, and execve. This is a system call which is used after fork to replace process memory space with a new program. Means it will share. If you call this execve, it also creates a new process, or if it is called after fork system call, it can share the memory with the child. Let me check whether fork will work on our online editor. Wait a minute. I'm writing the C program. Excuse me. It is just a printf statement. Okay, it is just a printf statement. Are you able to see the screen, editor?
You've forgotten the semicolon after printf.
This is the problem with command prompt. That command to create a new file. Then include how to execute this. If I say ls, I can see a dot c. How to execute it on a prompt? Cc is a command, a dot small c. Cc command is used to compile. Oh, I forgot to close the parentheses. Okay. Not available. Control D to come out, then CC to execute, to compile. The program is compiled successfully. To execute, file is ./a.out. Why /? Because the file is loaded on at root node. Dot is for root, and it is printing output hello. Now, if I use fork, at a1.c, what we have done? Just two printf statements, printf hi and printf hello. In between, I put this system called fork. So if without a fork, what will be the output? Hi, hello. Okay. Out, I have to press Ctrl D. Then cc, that is compiler A1, file name is a1.c. It will compile the code. Fork is not available. We include p3.h. That's why we need editor. We cannot type everything on a command prompt. That's why we need Eclipse and NetBeans and other IDEs which help us to type a program, save it, compile it. We have to just run, but you have to press the run button to execute a code. Here I have to come. I should know what are the commands for execution, compilation. /n again. I think fork should work now. Not understanding this fork. Okay. I have another editor. C compiler is visible. Normal C program with hello world command. If I run this, I'm getting the output hello world. Okay. Without, I'm not using fork 8. If I use fork here, fork is a command to, it's the system call, it is not a command, it is used to create a new process. Let's check the output. It is showing hello world 2 times. Can you see this output? I'll put /n. Again, I executed a code, but now it is printed hello world only once. So if I put this fork before printf statement, it is printing it twice. If I have, so how it works? So I have .c program. It is executing. Now it contains only one line, that is printf hello world. The program is executing, and here there is a fork command. What fork command does? Fork command creates a parallel process, parallel executing program. So this one is parent process, and this new is child process. So parent will continue execution and child will also continue execution. So if I use one more fork, what will be the output? Here, if I use one more fork command, what will be the output? How many times it will print hello world? So this C program is fork and printf statement. Okay. So what about this fork? It will create two parallel processes, and each process will have its own printf statement. So first process will print hello world, second process will also print hello world. Are you getting? If I have two fork commands, how many times it will print hello world? Are you there, girls?
4 times.
Yes, it will print 4 times because when you type one more fork, it will create two processes for each parent as well as for child. Executing this code. We have limitations about this online editor. And note that fork is not a command or not a function. It is a system call. So system is going to schedule this fork. So every time you may not get the same output. System will schedule as per the availability of CPU and other things for execution. Compile it. Every time whenever you run such programs, you'll get different outputs. This we are going to learn in depth in unit number 6. But I think you understood what I want to tell you. The fork command is used to create a new process. We'll get back to our slides. And execCBE, if you use this system call after fork, it will allocate or it will share the memory which is allocated to the parent with a child. So child process can replace the parent process. This is how a tree of processes on typical Linux system. We have seen file system of Unix. It starts from root, then we have home directory or root directory and other directories in home directory, and we can have other functions, or you can create your directories as per the user. Every user is allowed to create any number of directories as well as files. This is not about file system, this is about processes. So processes in Unix are typically like this: initial process, then different processes are there, user processes, kernel processes, etc. in a form of tree. If you try this command ps-l on your system, then it can show you all actual tree of the processes. As it is an online editor, it is not showing that perfect tree, but try this command ps space dash p, l, long listing. Then termination. We have created a process using fork command, and how to terminate a process. Process executes till last statement and ask operating system to decide it. That is exit, last statement, return 0 or return 1. So every process should give the control back to operating system, and operating system will decide whether to stop current process or keep it as it is till the child completes the execution. Output data from child to parent, that is wait. Let all children finish their execution, and then only parent process can be terminated. Process resources are deallocated by operating system. Now, at the time of termination, operating system already allocated many resources to processes for execution. So all these resources should be taken back and deallocated from the process. That is the job of OS. Parent may terminate execution of child process. Suppose one child process is not returning back and it is in infinite loop, and parent cannot finish its execution because of one of the child. So what parent can do is, parent can abruptly terminate the child process execution, child process execution. So this happens when child has exceeded allocated resources. If it is asking for more resources than allocated, or task assigned to child is no longer required, it is already done and still it is in execution. So let's stop that process. So while parent is exiting, operating system does not allow child to continue if its parent terminates. So whenever parent want to execute, all child has to finish their execution either naturally or forcefully. And it is called cascading termination. If we have a tree-like structure, process 1 has process 2, process 3, process 4. So process 4 should finish first, then process 3, then 2, and then 1. So it is cascading termination. So termination can be natural or abort, means process can finish by its own or forcefully terminated by parent process. Cooperating processes, when processes are executing parallelly and they need some resources from each other, or they want to exchange some data, or they want to check who is going to go first for execution. processes need to communicate with each other. So independent processes cannot affect or affected by execution of another process. If two processes are independent, they are not sharing any memory or data, so they can execute by their own, and execution of one process will not affect another process. For example, currently third year classes or final year classes are going on, and our class is also going on. So we are not having any interrupt uh, or any problem with each other because they are executing parallelly at their own pace. So these are independent processes, and cooperating processes can affect or affected by execution of another process. For example, suppose on your class, two teachers at a time try to conduct a class. So you are the resource, and two teachers want teachers are the processes, and they at a time want to engage you. So that will create a chaos. Um, so teachers should have a proper timetable, or they should have synchronization up, and there should not be any overlap. So that things need to be cooperated. Or so what is advantages of process cooperation? Information sharing. They are sharing information, computation speed up, modularity, and convenience. So processes can share resources, but they need synchronization. Uh, Producer consumer problem is for inter-process communication. We are going to learn in detail what is producer consumer problem and how to solve it in last unit. Threads are also part of last unit, but just for your curiosity, I'd like to introduce you here with a thread. A thread is called lightweight process, and normal process is called heavyweight process. Now you know that a process needs resources for execution like memory, files, CPU time, etc., etc. So if all these resources are available, then process can execute. So process come with all this burden. So that is called heavyweight process. And thread is a process, a small part of a process which can share many resources of a parent process and execute parallelly. So thread, which is called lightweight process, is a basic unit of CPU utilization. It consists of, it has its own program counter, register set, and stack space. We'll see threads in detail in sixth unit. This is just for your introduction. We didn't have thread as a part of our first unit. And thread can share with its peer thread code section, data section, and operating system resources. So this is not allocated separately for each and every thread. All threads will share common code section, common data section, and operating system resources. Traditional or normal process is called heavyweight process, which is equal to one thread. So these are the threads executing. So one program is executing, and at different, this is a program counter. One program is executing at this line, another program is executing at this line. The first program is just started. So at different execution time, this is one task. In single threaded process or normal application without parallelization, without making any new processes or threads, normal program, we have process control block for every process. User address space is allocated for every process. We have stack, kernel stack, and user stack or memory. So this is for a single threaded process or heavyweight process. In case of multi-threaded process, process control block and user address space is common. And for every thread, for each and every thread, we have thread control block, similar to process control block. And user stack and kernel stack separately for each thread. So these are the states of a thread. So we know what is ready state, running state, waiting state, terminating state, and new state. Now here we have two more states, standby state and transition state. So process is in ready state, it is picked to run, but it is not allocated to the CPU. It is called standby. And from standby, then when the CPU is ready, it is allocated for execution. If preempted, get back to ready state. From running state, it can be terminated, or if it has to wait for IO, then it will enter into wait state. Again, it can resume or unblock and go back to ready state. and unblocked but resource not yet available. Means it has done with input output operation, but in resources it is applying for more resources which are not currently available. So it is not ready to run, and but it has performed IO operation. So what about that process? It has to wait. So it will wait in transition state, and when resource gets available, it is allocated to ready state. So all these processes, ready, standby, and running, are called runnable processes. And when it is terminated, waiting, or in transition, it is called not runnable threads. Benefits of thread. Thread takes less time to create a new thread than a process, less time to terminate a thread than a process, less time to switch between two threads within the same process, and since thread within the same process share memory and files, they can communicate with each other without invoking the kernel. These are the advantages or benefits of thread. Whenever you open a new window, whenever you start the application first time, it takes time. For example, if you try to open a Chrome, it takes time. But if you open a new tab from the same window, it won't take that much time. So that second tab is a thread of Chrome process. And when it is advantages, it takes less time to create, less time to terminate, less time to switch between two threads of the same process, and they can share memory, files, and communicate without invoking kernel. So in case of inter-process communication, that is IPC or Unit 6, it is all about how these processes will communicate with each other. That will see in unit number 6. So you can skip these slides while studying for unit number 1 from cooperative processes. You have to just remember how to create process and how to terminate a process. Next part is CPU scheduling. Slides are visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So in this topic, we will see what are the basic concepts of CPU scheduling, on what basis will decide or operating system decides which process should be allocated to the CPU. From ready queue. Ready queue, there are many processes are ready to run. From ready queue to running queue, or ready queue to ready state to running state. How to transfer these processes based on which criteria? We'll see what are the scheduling criteria. Then scheduling algorithms. Yesterday I talked about FCFS, SJF, SRTF, and round robin. We are going to study these algorithms. These algorithms are for uniprocessor system. Means we assume that we have a single processor in our operating system has to allocate processes to a single processor. Then if we have multiple processors, more than one processors, we'll see those algorithms for applicable for multiple processor scheduling. Then real-time scheduling, and we'll check with how to compare these algorithms, algorithm evaluation part. So basic concept is we have to increase or improvise or maximize CPU utilization. CPU, that is processor, should not be idle. We have the maximum CPU utilization obtained with multi-programming. We have seen that. If we add more processes in execution, CPU time or CPU utilization can be increased. And we have also seen that some processes have CPU burst as well as IO burst. Some processes are called IO bound processes, which has longer IO burst than CPU burst. And some processes are called CPU bound, which have larger CPU burst than IO burst. So process is made up of these two types, CPU burst and IO burst. These are the cycles, CPU, then IO, then CPU, then IO, etc. Process execution consists of a cycle of CPU execution and IO bit. So in CPU, process executes instructions, and for IO, process waits. And how the CPU burst distribution is. So if you have, the assembly language program, load and store instructions. So it is loading something into memory, it is adding to store, reading from a file. So this is CPU burst. Then it will perform some IO operations. So that is IO burst. Then it will increment, index, and write into a file. This is again CPU burst. Then opening and closing files will come into IO burst. So for any process, there is a cycle of CPU, IO, CPU, IO, CPU, and IO, like this, alternating sequence of CPU and IO burst. Now for our algorithm evaluation part or CPU scheduling part, we are concentrating only on CPU burst. Only this CPU burst. How much time that process needs to execute in CPU. What is the job of CPU scheduler? Now, which is a CPU scheduler, long term or short term? Which scheduler is called
Short term.
Short term scheduler. Now we are that phase, right? From ready to running. And short term scheduler has to decide which process to pick from ready state and put in running state. That is the CPU scheduler's job. It selects among the processes in memory that are ready to execute and allocate the CPU to one of them. And on what basis it will take the decision? CPU scheduling decision may take place when a process, so switching from running to wait. So process can be in different states. It is from running to wait state, then running to ready state, or from wait state to ready state, and terminates. So 1 to 4, 1 and 4, that is termination and running to wait, is called non-preemptive. And all other schedulings are preemptive. Preemptive means can be interrupted in between, and non-preemptive means cannot be interrupted. Dispatcher, what is dispatcher? Medium term scheduler. Dispatcher module gives control of CPU to the process selectively by the short term scheduler. That is context switch, switching to user mode, jumping to the proper location in user program to restart the program. This is the new term, dispatch latency. Time it takes for the dispatcher to stop one process and start another process. Now what we have seen in previous session is, what is a dispatcher? It performs swap in and swap out, remove a process from running state and put that process in ready state. So this task may involve some time elapse, or we have seen the word context switch. So latency, that is dispatch latency, is time it takes for a dispatcher to stop one process and start another process. So what a process has to do? Process has to save, when the process has to stop, it has to save its states in process control block, and another process who want to execute, that has to load its state from process control block and resume execution. Scheduling criteria on which scheduling algorithm depends upon. First one is CPU utilization. We have to keep CPU as busy as possible. What is CPU? Processor. Processor should be as busy as possible. Then throughput, what we are studying the criteria for CPU scheduling. On what basis we are going to select one algorithm over another algorithm. There should be some criteria, right? So what is a throughput? Throughput is number of processes that are complete their execution per unit time. So suppose we started system at 1 o'clock, and then at 1:30 we have to check how many processes are finished. So that is a throughput. At particular unit of time, how many processes completed their execution. Turnaround time, amount of time to execute a particular process, means process entered into the new state until it terminates. Total time the process is wandering from one state to another state, and then finally it gets terminated. So all the time together is called turnaround time. Amount of time to execute a particular process, starting from ready, new to ready, ready to running, running back to ready or wait, all the time combined together, starting started, process execution started and it is terminated. Complete time is called turnaround time. Wait time. Wait time means process is not in execution. Time of amount of process has been waiting in ready queue. So process can wait in ready queue, can wait in wait queue, can wait in say transition state or any other state till it is allocated to the CPU. That is called wait time for every process. And response time, amount of time it takes from a request was submitted until first response is produced. It is not the output. Process is not finished yet, but first time when it is allocated for the CPU, it is called response time. In time sharing environment, we have seen time sharing operating system, the advantage or objective is to improve, increase response time. First time process is allocated to the CPU. So optimization criteria is we have to maximize CPU utilization. By applying algorithm, CPU utilization should increase. Maximize throughput. Throughput is number of processes finish their execution. So that should improve. Turnaround time, we have to reduce. Minimum time process should take between new to terminate. Process should complete its execution as fast as possible. So we have to reduce turnaround time. We have to reduce wait time and response time. Maximize throughput and utilization. Any queries about these criteria and optimization criteria or scheduling criteria? About dispatch latency? I'll just introduce you with the first algorithm, first come, first serve. First algorithm is FCFS, which is called first come, first serve. As the name says, the process who arrived first will be allocated to the CPU first. So here we have three processes, P1, P2 and P3, and this is burst time. So it is burst time, CPU burst time. We are talking about CPU burst, not the IO burst. If arrival time is not given, we assume that arrival time is 0 for every process and burst time is given, which is 2433. Meaning is P1 will require 24 CPU cycles for its execution, P2 will require only 3 cycles and P3 will also require only 3 cycles for its execution. And these processes are in ready queue. P1, P2 and P3. They are in ready queue. This queue is called ready queue. And we have to start, we have to check which process should be allocated to the CPU. V means short-term scheduler. Short-term scheduler has to take a decision. These three processes are ready to run. This is their requirement 2433. Which process should be allocated to the CPU? So first algorithm is FCFS, first come, first serve. So P1 had come first in a sequence. So P1 will be allocated to the CPU. This is CPU time, which is called Gantt chart. Gantt chart shows execution of a CPU. Gantt chart shows which are the processes currently in execution in a CPU. So at 0, P1 is allocated to the CPU for 24 cycles. Then P2, first come, first serve in a queue. Next process is P2 for next 3 cycles, 24 plus 3, that is 27. And then P3 will be allocated for next 3 cycles, 27 plus 3, that is 30. And what we have to calculate? We have to calculate wait time and turnaround time. On slides, you can see the Gantt chart. So we have to calculate finish time when this process is finished. Then turnaround time and wait time. Finish time, turnaround time and wait time. How to calculate finish time? Finish time means You can see from the Gantt chart, P1 is finished at 24. So finish time for P1 is 24. Finish time for P2 is 27. And for P3, it is 30. So when the process finished its execution in a CPU. Finish time for P1, P2 and P3. You have to calculate turnaround time. Turnaround time is finish time minus arrival time. Now in our case, all the processes arrived at same time but in that sequence. So we allocated it P1, P2, P3. So turnaround time is equal to finish time. 24 minus 0, 27 minus 0, 30 minus 0. Otherwise, if arrival time is given, turnaround time can change. And wait time, how to calculate wait time? Wait time is turnaround time minus burst time. Turnaround time means starting from new to finish, total time traveled by that process, and wait time is it is waiting in any of the queue. It is not executed by the CPU. So out of 24, burst time is 24 and it is executed for 24 cycles. So wait time is 0. Turnaround time minus burst time. In this case, 27 minus 3. So it is wait time for P2, it is 24. In wait time for P3, it is 27. So P2, even if it arrived at a fraction of second time behind P2, P1, it has to wait for 27 cycles for its execution. And average wait time, calculate the average of this. 51 divided by 3. So that is 17. So wait time for P1 is 0, P2 is 24 and P3 is 27 and average wait time is 17. Just check if the process arrived in the order of P2, P3 and P1. What will be the average wait time if these processes arrive in this order? 2, 3 and 1. So burst time is 3, 3 and 24. So calculate finish time, turnaround time and wait time. If these processes arrive in this sequence, so P2 will execute for 3 cycles, followed by P3 will execute for next 3 cycles, and then P1 will execute for next 24 cycles. What is finish time of P2?
3.
3,
P3
6,
and P1.
30,
Calculate wait time, turnaround time is similar to finish time. So 3 minus 0.
3.
Sorry, 3 minus 3. Finish time minus burst time. Turnaround time minus burst time. So P2 is not waiting. It is arrived and allocated to the CPU. So no wait time for P2. 0. For P3, 6 minus 3, it has to wait for 3 cycles. Then for P1, it has to wait for 6 cycles. 30 minus 24. So average wait time is 9. 6 plus 3 plus 0. 9 divided by 3, which is 3. And it was 17 when the sequence was P1, P2, P3. And if the sequence is changed, it is now 3. So which is better? But as a scheduler cannot decide which algorithm or which process should be allocated first, because it depends upon the sequence. The processes arrived in that sequence. So a CPU scheduler has to take a decision to allocate CPU to P1. So if the processes arrived in this order, you will get average wait time is 3, which is much better than previous case. And this concept is called convoy effect. Convoy effect means short process behind a long process. You Always we observe this type of scenario whenever we stand in a queue, we assume that our queue is moving very slow, or the person who is just in front of us has to do a lot of work, and ours is a very small work, but we have to wait till that person get his job will done first. So a shortest process behind a longest process is called convoy equity. That is the problem with first come first serve algorithm. We'll stop here. In next lecture we'll continue with more examples on FCFS and rest of the algorithms. For attendance, password is HCFS capital.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, Aditi.
Ma'am, sorry to ask. Is it your birthday today?
Which is the next lecture?
Maths M3.
Okay. Yes, Riddhi. Are you there?